At 06:17, the blades of the inbound MH-60 Seahawk stirred the early light over the flight deck of the USS Enterprise CVN-80. Crewmen paused their tasks, instinctively bracing against the rotor wash as the bird touched down in a textbook landing near the forward edge of the deck. The air smelled like salt, grease, and jet exhaust, standard morning ops in the middle of the Pacific. From the open cabin door, a single figure stepped down. She wore a sun-bleached bomber jacket with frayed cuffs, jeans stiff with wear, and tan combat boots scuffed white at the toes. Her canvas duffel was slung over one shoulder, light enough to suggest she didn't plan on staying long. Lieutenant Callan Rowe spotted her instantly. He wasn't expecting civilians, much less one without a flight manifest. With quick strides, he crossed the deck and held out a gloved hand to halt her forward progress. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some ID," he said, raising his voice slightly over the dying engine noise. The woman didn't flinch. She reached calmly into her jacket and handed over a military-issued identification card, its edges worn and its barcode half faded. Rowe scanned it against the portable terminal clipped to his chest rig. The screen blinked red. Invalid credential. Clearance mismatch. No active records found. Rowe looked up. There was no embarrassment in her eyes, no confusion, just steady attention, like she'd expected the result. He reset the scanner and tried again. Same response. He cleared his throat. "This ID isn't in our system. I'll need to take you to the bridge for clarification. You're not cleared to be on this ship without orders." She said nothing, simply stepped to the side, waiting for him to lead. As they moved across the flight deck, her gaze flicked toward the radar dome above the island structure, then to the comm arrays anchored beside the island's top deck. Not casual glances. These were calibrated assessments. Rowe noticed. The morning tempo on the Enterprise hadn't slowed, but a ripple of curiosity followed their movement. Sailors paused just long enough to glance, then resumed loading chains, checking fueling lines, resetting tie-downs. Someone muttered under their breath. Another whispered. Rowe caught none of it. But the woman clearly did. She showed no reaction. Inside the portside entry to the superstructure, Rowe keyed them through 2 security doors, leading toward officers' country. She moved with quiet precision, neither straining to see nor lagging behind. When another petty officer passed in the corridor, she offered a nod without words. The sailor looked startled, mumbled something, and kept walking. By the time they reached the lower deck leading to the Combat Information Center, Rowe was aware of a strange tension in his chest. It wasn't just that the ID was invalid. It was her silence. The way she never broke stride. The way she looked at radar consoles like she understood them better than he did. Outside CIC, he tapped his comms. "Sir, we have an unscheduled visitor. Civilian, invalid credentials, came in on the 0610 Seahawk from Ford Island, awaiting further instructions." He glanced back. She was staring at a bulkhead-mounted schematic of the ship's sensor grid, eyes narrowing slightly at the section covering weather analysis. The reply came back after a few seconds. "Bring her in." The tone was clipped, not pleased. Rowe reached for the handle and nodded. "This way." As the door hissed open, he heard muffled voices from within, the sounds of briefing chatter and tactical updates. But the moment she stepped across the threshold, those voices faded. She didn't look left or right. She looked up. At the ceiling-mounted display tracking aerial formations over open water, the screen had begun to flicker only slightly, but enough to make one of the junior officers frown and tap his console. Her eyes held on that screen for 3 full seconds before she lowered them. Rowe announced her presence with military clarity. "Civilian visitor. No verified clearance. Arrived with supply run. Colonel Merrick, standing at the head of the operations table, turned slowly. He wasn't a tall man, but there was something broad in his posture, like He'd grown into his rank through repetition. His eyes scanned the woman once. Then again. There was a pause. Then came the first smile. It wasn't kind. "This is a combat vessel, Lieutenant, not a coffee shop. You don't get to show up and browse." The room chuckled. It wasn't mean-spirited, just a trained response to command humor. She remained still, her duffel still slung over her shoulder, her jacket zip just low enough to reveal a complex tattoo curling along her left forearm. It wasn't a typical tribal design. The lines were mathematical, interlaced with angles and mirrored symmetry. Roe's eye caught it. So did the chief petty officer manning the sonar desk. Merrick took a step forward, clearly aiming to continue the joke. But something about her expression, unreadable, patient, made him hesitate just half a second too long. She didn't answer. She didn't correct him. She just looked. The lights dimmed slightly as the ship's power grid adjusted to a secondary systems test. Somewhere in the ceiling, relays shifted. The radar screen flickered again. And for a moment, no one said anything. Roe felt it then. Not fear, not awe. Just a question he couldn't form yet. He didn't know who she was. But she wasn't lost. She wasn't guessing. She knew exactly where she stood. Inside the Combat Information Center, overhead displays tracked patrol aircraft and regional sea traffic. At the center, Colonel Cole Merrick stood with a tablet in one hand, flanked by two operations officers reviewing a scheduled defensive drill. The briefing had shifted from air defense readiness to electromagnetic countermeasures when the door opened without warning. Lieutenant Roe entered first, crisp, but visibly uncertain. Behind him, the woman walked in, her boots muffled by the anti-skid flooring. Her bomber jacket still bore salt crust along the collar. The canvas bag remained on her shoulder. She stopped 2 paces inside and waited. Merrick didn't look up right away. He finished his sentence, tapped something on his screen, and finally glanced toward the intrusion. His expression soured instantly. "Lieutenant, explain this civilian interruption," he said, not bothering to mask the edge in his voice. Roe straightened. "Sir, she arrived on the 0610 Seahawk from Ford Island. No manifest. No verified credentials. ID scan returns invalid." Merrick raised a brow, his tone sliding into sarcasm. "So we're accepting walk-ons now. Does she want a tour? A hat from the ship store?" A few officers smirked. One chuckled. The woman didn't react. She kept her eyes on Merrick, her posture neutral. Merrick stepped closer, stopping just within her personal space. His eyes swept over the faded jacket, the worn jeans, the boots. He scoffed. That, a uniform, or just the latest trend in ironic fashion, you with vice, or maybe an influencer. He tilted his head and added, "You're not filming, are you? We don't allow TikToks from the CIC." The laugh from the sonar station was short, but sharp. The woman remained silent. She shifted her weight slightly, drawing Merrick's eyes to her left forearm where the jacket sleeve had ridden up. His expression changed. "What is that?" He gestured toward the tattoo, a precise pattern of interlocking shapes spiraling inward. He bent closer, squinting. "I've seen that before. Some offshoot of sacred geometry or maybe a gang symbol. Let me guess. You're part of some cult that thinks we're broadcasting alien messages through weather radars." He stood upright again, clearly amused with himself. Roe opened his mouth, unsure whether to intervene. The woman moved only to adjust her bag strap. Merrick folded his arms. "If you're not going to talk, this conversation is over. Lieutenant, escort her to visitor quarters. We'll figure out what paperwork went missing. And get Admiral Kessler's office on the line. I want answers before lunch." She turned without argument, following Roe back toward the hatch. As they exited, one of the junior techs leaned toward a radar station. Her eyes. Did you see how she was looking at the EM display? Like she was reading it? Merrick rolled his eyes. "Don't give me that spooky nonsense. She's just another lost civilian thinking she knows something. Happens every time we dock at Pearl. But he didn't look entirely convinced. Lieutenant Rowe had barely reached the CIC exit when the woman stopped walking. Her voice, quiet but clear, cut through the soft hum of electronics. Arden. Just that. No context. No explanation. Not even a pause to see who responded. Colonel Merrick, halfway back to his station, turned slowly. He blinked, thrown off by the word. Arden. That your name? He sounded more amused than interested. Not commander, not doctor, not even a last name. Just Arden Cute. The woman didn't answer. Her gaze drifted to the main radar display positioned above the command console. Rowe turned too. He hadn't noticed anything at first. But now, one of the EM operators had gone still, her hand frozen above a touchscreen. "Sir, we've got some jitter on the primary array," she said. "Could be solar interference, but the symmetry's strange." The display showed a pattern, tight concentric fluctuations over a fixed sector. Nothing erratic, just wrong. Arden stepped closer. Bearing 051, full turn, 7 minutes. Her tone was so even it landed like a readout, not a suggestion. Merrick barked a dry laugh. "Well, I hope your tarot cards are aligned for that one. You got a crystal ball in that duffel." The radar operator looked over. "Sir, it's..." Repeating. Not noise. "There's structure here." She didn't sound sure of herself. Merrick snapped. "Enough. Don't feed this fantasy. Some civilian walks in with a sci-fi tattoo and starts giving orders. This is a warship, not Comic-Con." He pointed at Rowe. "Take her to holding. Now. I want her processed and flagged until we get Kessler on the line." Arden didn't flinch. She didn't look at Merrick. She just kept watching the radar like she was waiting for something only she could see. The hum of the systems deepened. One of the auxiliary monitors began to glitch. A low static pulse ran through the overhead speakers before resolving. Rowe hesitated. He didn't know why. Her voice hadn't been threatening. She hadn't moved. But the room felt different. Like she belonged more than anyone else here did. Even if no one could say why. Merrick caught the pause. "Now, Lieutenant. Unless you want to explain to your CO why you're stalling on a direct order." Rowe nodded, tight-lipped. "This way." Arden followed without resistance. As they exited, one of the junior officers whispered near the back of the CIC, "What if she's not guessing Merrick didn't hear it? Or pretended not to?" He was already barking into the comms, demanding fleet confirmation codes and clearance updates. No one noticed that the radar continued to shift, steady, precise, aligned exactly to bearing 051. At 0708, the first systems glitch hit. What started as radar distortion turned into full sensor desync. The main display blinked twice, lost calibration, then came back with red-tagged anomalies in a 5-point radial spread. Nobody recognized the pattern. In CIC, voices rose, as diagnostics failed to isolate a source. Lieutenant Commander Wren tapped furiously at her console. "Sir, the auto-stabilization loop won't reset. I've got conflicting altitude readings from both E-2D Hawkeye patrols, no storm activity, no jamming signatures." Merrick frowned, stepping closer. "Check SATCOM, uplink, and tell me we still have GPS lock." "Negative. Global position shows drift. Local nav is stuck on hold." "Sir, we're not moving, but sensors say we're rotating 5 degrees off bearing." The carrier's deck felt stable, but the data was chaos. Then came the override alert. It started on one screen. Then, all of them. "Warning. Bridge control locked. Navigation override engaged. Command input detected. Echo prime signature." Merrick snapped to attention. "Whose input? Who has bridge override access on this channel?" His command keycard didn't work. The biometric pad on his terminal turned red. Weapons Officer Grant stood from her station. "Sir, we're reading internal system access from CIC itself, not from engineering, not from bridge." Someone's triggering a priority 1 lockdown from inside our own network. The room fell into a stunned silence. On the center screen, the interface recompiled. A code string pulsed across the top bar, Arden. 7, Echo, Prime. Below it, 1 line blinked in red. Ghost protocol activated. Chief Bennett gasped. That's not in any operational directive. That's black tier access. Not even Fleet Command uses that protocol. A low hum ran through the deck as power rerouted. Lights dimmed to emergency levels. Internal doors locked in sequence. Red status bands lit up along the walls. Merrick tried to override the lockout. His voice cut sharp. Commander Wren, crash the command channel. Pull backup systems online. Give me bridge control now. Wren's face paled. Sir, I can't. Manual input is being rejected. The system says command authority has been reassigned. To who her voice trembled, Arden Thorne. No one spoke. The name hit like a depth charge. Merrick turned toward the hatch. Arden was gone. He'd locked her in holding minutes ago. But the system didn't care where she stood. It had chosen. And she hadn't asked permission. The display reset once more. This time it showed a full ship schematic with route plotted to bearing 051, just like she'd said. Engines acknowledged course input. Guidance was engaged. All across CIC, alarms reset, not warning tones, confirmation chimes. As if the ship had just been told what to do, Merrick stared at the screen, jaw clenched. Who the hell is she? No one answered. They were already turning. The CIC lights steadied to a dim, amber hue. Emergency power held, but the tension inside the room had only deepened. On every monitor, the route projection continued unchallenged, plotted with military precision along a vector no one had authorized. At the bottom of the screen, the phrase still blinked in quiet defiance. Ghost protocol activated. Commander Wren stepped back from her terminal. Her voice was low. Sir, someone's opened a Level 9 access channel to Fleet Command. Merrick didn't speak. His hand hovered over his tablet, frozen between trying to reassert authority and admitting it had already been lost. The main display flickered again. This time, it wasn't routing data. It was personnel clearance, top-line security format, classification Umbra tier, Operator Commander Arden Thorne, status presumed KIA, Operation Echo Horizon, assignment Ghost Protocol, Quantum Liaison Unit. Someone behind Merrick whispered, That can't be real. It was the kind of file no one expected to see, because no one was supposed to know it existed. Arden's photo appeared beside the data. It was her. Same eyes, same expressionless focus. But the uniform bore rank, ribbons, and an insignia no one could identify. The tag beneath read, Commander, United States Navy, active status conditional. Before Merrick could respond, another voice broke through. Not from inside the room, from a secure uplink, fully encoded and unspoofable. A small camera above the central console activated. The face of Admiral Thorsten Blackwood appeared on the screen. His presence changed the atmosphere instantly. He wore no dress blues, only a black ops utility jacket with a command bar. His voice was firm. This is Admiral Blackwood, Joint Command Pacific. I am initiating operational confirmation for Ghost Protocol Umbra asset. Commander Arden Thorne. Merrick straightened instinctively. Sir, Blackwood didn't look at him. His eyes went past Merrick and locked onto Arden, who had stepped into the room behind them. She stood at ease, not speaking, not asking. The ship had already obeyed her. Blackwood's voice softened slightly. Commander Thorne, do you confirm operational continuity under Protocol Umbra? Yes, Admiral. Protocol is stable. Communication contact is underway. Field control is established. The system accepted her voice print. Command transfer confirmed, said the interface. On every console in CIC, the message appeared in sequence. Command Authority Commander Arden Thorne, Umbra tier active. No one moved. Not even Merrick. His rank meant nothing now. Every sailor and officer in the room turned toward her. For the first time since arriving, Arden allowed the silence to settle. Then she looked at Merrick. "I didn't ask for your trust, Colonel. I just needed your ship." He didn't answer. He couldn't. She passed him without pause, approaching the tactical console like it was built for her. The room felt different now. Not confused, not hostile, just quiet, like gravity had shifted, like everyone finally understood who she really was. The CIC remained quiet as Commander Arden Thorne pulled up a diagnostic schematic from the central console. She moved with steady precision, every keystroke deliberate. Around her, senior officers gathered in a loose half-circle, eyes fixed on the central display. Colonel Merrick stood closest, arms folded but no longer defensive. He watched her, not as a threat, but as someone holding answers he wasn't prepared to question anymore. On screen, a 3D overlay formed. It showed the USS Enterprise in top-down projection, surrounded by curved fields of fluctuating data. The lines shimmered, pulsing in a rhythm that seemed organic, not noise, not random. She pointed to the outermost ripple. "These are quantum wake distortions. They've been tailing us since 0600, maintaining an average distance of 21 nautical miles." She tapped a key. The data expanded to show acceleration vectors, correlation clusters, field harmonics. The officers watched, silent. Arden continued. "These aren't atmospheric anomalies or sonar reflections. They're entities, not ships, not drones. Something else, something alive." Lieutenant Commander Wren leaned in. "But how are we seeing them? Our sensors shouldn't be able to resolve anything at that scale." Arden nodded. "That's where the protocol comes in." She unzipped her sleeve, revealing the full tattoo now in the low light. The pattern was intricate, geometrical in layers. At first glance it resembled fractals, but with embedded symbols and alphanumerics nested along invisible axes. She held her arm beneath a biometric sensor. The screen changed again. This time it showed a side-by-side one. The resonance output from the tattoo. The other. The active fluctuation patterns from the entities outside. A perfect match. They're not just mimicking our sensors. They're responding to me. Merrick's jaw tightened. "That ink. It's not just a design. Is it?" She met his gaze. "No. It's not ink at all. It's a neural integrated quantum receiver, built from semi-organic materials. It responds to frequency shifts that bypass conventional communication. Think of it as a hybrid between a language and a key." She rotated her forearm slightly. As she did, the outer patterns on the screen shifted. Slight pulses of blue light traced beneath her skin. Merrick took a step back. "That's active you're broadcasting. Not constantly. It operates on resonance. They speak in patterns spatial, harmonic, dimensional. This allows partial synchronization with their field logic. They don't process sound or light the way we do. They interpret motion, density, time compression." Blackwood's voice came through briefly over the comms. His tone was low, more reflective than commanding. She was the only survivor of Echo Horizon. Her vessel was destroyed when they made initial contact. But they recognized something in her. Something they could talk to. Arden didn't react to the mention. She zoomed the screen outward. The 5-point formation had now begun to orbit the carrier's vector path. "See this? They've shifted from observation to structural positioning. They're adapting to our presence, matching speed, bearing, even sonar range." Commander Wren narrowed her eyes. "But why the secrecy? Why Ghost Protocol? Why not loop in the fleet or even UN command?" Arden looked at her, voice steady. "Because conventional command isn't built to handle things that don't fit doctrine. Ghost Protocol exists for the impossible. When we can't afford bureaucracy or time, when something requires direct, unfiltered decision-making." She tapped the display again, cycling through archived data from Echo Horizon. The sonar graphs were distorted, wild, until there a single frame showed a clear match between an energy burst and the symbol now etched into her skin. They responded to me, and they still do. Merrick spoke quietly. You volunteered for this. She didn't hesitate. Yes. After Echo Horizon, they offered a shutdown. Full memory wipe. Fade back into civilian life. But I remembered too much. I saw too much. She looked down at her arm. The glow had faded again, resting like faint circuitry under the skin. This receiver was the result of 3 months inside a black facility. It's bonded to my nervous system. It interprets their pulses, translates what it can, sends back enough for them to recognize intention, maybe even trust. The screen began flashing a new pattern. It resembled her tattoo exactly, stretched in polar symmetry around the ship's projected path. Merrick took a slow breath. They're forming the pattern outside. They are... She didn't sound surprised. That's not an attack posture. It's alignment. They're waiting for us to respond. Merrick looked around the room. Every officer's eyes were locked on the screen. No one doubted her anymore. So what do we do now? He asked. Arden turned to face them. We talk back, and we do it carefully, because they don't understand rank, or flags, or threat posture. They understand resonance. And right now, I'm the only resonance they recognize. She let the silence linger. The weight of what she was saying landed like pressure on the hull. This wasn't just a strange event. It wasn't a malfunction or even a security breach. It was something far older. And it had chosen to speak. At 09:42, the flight deck of the USS Enterprise cleared for restricted operations. Non-essential personnel were evacuated. Communications shifted to encrypted shortwave relays. Overhead, the morning sky had dulled to a strange gray, though no clouds moved above them. The deck shimmered faintly under the quantum field generator just brought online by the response team. At the center stood Commander Arden Thorne and her brother, Dr. Darius Thorne. They said little as they took their positions 10 feet apart, sleeves rolled up, tattoos exposed. The receivers embedded in their forearms had already begun to pulse with low-frequency energy, synchronized to the carrier's calibrated bandwidth. Chief Wren's voice came through the comms. Quantum field holding steady at 47%. No flux breaches yet. Darius gave a nod, his expression focused. Ready. Arden answered without words, adjusting her breathing. She raised her arm toward the forward array. The moment she did, the field intensified. Static crawled up the steel bulkheads. The air thickened, like pressure before a storm. Then the light changed, not brighter or darker, but refracted bent in odd vectors around them. Across the far edge of the flight deck, a ripple appeared, not on the surface, not in the air, but in the shape of reality itself. The distortion shimmered like a lens turned wrong, revealing something behind the skin of the world. Everyone watching froze. There was no sound, no heat, just movement that didn't follow physics. Arden and Darius lifted both arms in unison. Their tattoos flared, lines rearranging, forming shapes no one had ever written, but that somehow felt deliberate. Synchronous, geometric pulses triggered through the receivers, broadcasting across the field. The distortion pulsed in response, like a heartbeat made of light. Arden closed her eyes briefly. Her breath hitched. They're listening. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Darius spoke next, guiding modulation changes through tactile pulses in his wrist. Shift frequency band to 62.8 kilohertz. Pattern loop. Triple layered. They worked like a single system. The air between them and the entity rippled again. This time, shapes emerged. Not solid, not truly visible, but forms began to coalesce in layered spirals like DNA sequences projected into mist. The crew watching from the CIC saw it all through camera relay, most of them speechless. The exchange lasted 3 minutes. Time felt longer. Arden's legs trembled by the end, her hand drifting slightly out of sync. Darius reached over, steadied her elbow, and matched her pace. The final pulse from the entity sent a cascading glow through both tattoos, then faded. The distortion dissolved, leaving behind nothing but the hum of the ship. Silence. Arden exhaled. Darius leaned forward, bracing on his knees. It worked. They're trying to understand. He looked at her, face pale but eyes bright. And they're learning fast. She nodded, voice unsteady but clear. So are we. At 10:03, just 20 minutes after the first successful contact, the warning klaxons erupted across the ship. Red lights strobed along the flight deck railings. Inside CIC, Chief Wren shouted over the comms. Sudden spike in quantum field density. It's not from the entities. It's coming from inside the carrier. In the auxiliary hangar, a secondary team was running diagnostics when the surge hit. Arden's wrist comm flared. Unauthorized signal detected. Source internal. Doctor. Darius Thorne turned sharply as the deck beneath them vibrated, a deep pulse like sonar gone rogue. He reached for the portable field reader on his belt. This isn't external. Someone's jamming the quantum channel. Hard. Before Arden could reply, the air around them shifted. Not like before. Not rhythmic. Not measured. It jolted. Fractured. A second pulse hit the hull. This one deeper, accompanied by a loud groan in the steel beneath their feet. Bulkhead sensors across decks 4 and 5 lit red. Structural stress thresholds exceeded. Inside CIC, Merrick slammed his hand on the console. Report. What just hit us? Wren looked pale. It's a field disruption. Quantum scattering device, mid-grade. It's broadcasting on the same frequency we used for contact. They're interpreting it as an attack. Arden and Darius were already running, moving fast through narrow maintenance corridors. Arden's tattoo flickered erratically, trying to realign with the distorted frequency. They turned a corner near Weapons Locker 3 just as the ship jerked starboard. Emergency interlocks hissed. Darius grabbed a rail, nearly losing his footing. They're panicking. They don't understand. It's noise to them, painful noise. In the auxiliary hangar, the source came into view. A small black cylindrical unit on a tripod, humming with unstable energy. Standing next to it was Lieutenant Parr, one of the physicists from the civilian response team. He was muttering into a secured handheld unit, eyes wide, face pale. Arden didn't hesitate. Disengage it. Now. Parr backed away, voice cracking. You don't understand. They're a threat. We need leverage. Arden moved fast. Shoulder checked him aside and dropped to one knee at the device's base. Darius joined her, scanning for the pulse origin. Power cut failed. The disruptor was shielded. Darius traced the cable line, found the manual override, and yanked it free. The humming stopped. The air stilled. But outside, the damage had been done. Back in CIC, Wren yelled, quantum readings stabilizing. But barely. They're pulling back, but their formations compressed. Merrick stared at the data. Defensive posture. Arden's voice came through, breathless but controlled. Do not engage. Repeat. Do not engage. It was internal sabotage. We've neutralized the source. Give me 30 seconds to re-establish alignment. The ship creaked again, but slower now. The entity patterns were receding, no longer tightening. Darius steadied her arm, linked both their receivers, and sent one final pulse out. A soft blue wave radiated from their tattoos. A pause followed. Then the pressure began to ease. Arden lowered her arm. Her voice dropped. They're giving us one more chance. If we make another mistake, they won't ask questions. Neither will I. At 05:27, the final pulse cleared the ship. It came like a breeze through steel. No sound, no heat, just release. The USS Enterprise stabilized over calm Pacific water, her systems slowly returning to baseline. CIC consoles blinked green. Hull stress readings fell within normal parameters. And outside, 20 nautical miles off port. The formation of light, the impossible entities dissolved into the sea air as if they had never been. On the flight deck, beneath softening stars, Arden and Darius Thorne stood side by side, arms slack at their sides, their tattoos dimmed to a resting glow, the resonance field gone quiet at last. Arden breathed deeply, not from exhaustion, but from something older. Relief. Finality. From CIC, Admiral Blackwood's voice came in over a private encrypted channel. Operation Umbra is closed. Contact verified. Signal stabilized. Command records sealed. You did it. Commander, return at will. Voice clipped, but there was weight behind it. Real weight. Gratitude without embellishment. Darius turned to Arden. His face carried lines of fatigue, but his eyes were steady. They listened. You made them listen. She shook her head softly. No. We made them understand. That's harder. Behind them, the CIC elevator opened. Merrick stepped onto the deck alone. No escort. No comms link. Just him in his wrinkled uniform, wind catching the corners of his jacket. He stopped a few feet away. Commander, he said, voice quiet but firm. His posture wasn't rigid, just still. I was wrong. About you. About everything. I'm sorry. Arden gave a nod. That's not why I'm here. But thank you for saying it. He looked down at the deck for a moment, then back at her. The men and women on this ship, they owe you. We all do. What happened here? It wasn't just protocol. It was something bigger. Something none of us were ready for. She didn't argue, didn't correct him. She didn't need to. Merrick glanced toward Darius, then back again. What happens now? Do you debrief? Go back to command. Arden smiled faintly. No. I disappear. Her voice carried no sadness. This isn't a mission you log in a report. It's one you walk away from, silently. The next time they appear, they won't ask for permission. They'll remember how we responded. Merrick gave a quiet nod. And if they come looking for you? She looked east, where the sun had begun to crest low across the ocean, casting golden light over the flight deck. They won't. And if they do, someone else will be ready. There was a long pause. Nothing but the sound of ocean wind, the occasional hum of cooling engines, and far below, the rhythm of a ship that had nearly come apart from the inside. Merrick stepped back, saluted. No theatrics, no ceremony, just a gesture of earned respect. Darius placed a hand gently on Arden's shoulder. She looked once more at the horizon, then at the deck, the ship, the crew who had stood in judgment and ended in silence. And finally, she turned and walked toward the Seahawk at the far end of the flight deck. The rotors were already turning, slow and steady. She climbed aboard without looking back. The helicopter lifted at 0541. No radio contact, no flight plan, just a dark shape rising into the morning sky, vanishing into clouds that weren't on radar. By the time the sun fully rose, the Enterprise had resumed standard operations. Systems normalized. Crew rotated back into shifts. Engineers repaired what little needed fixing. And on every deck, from CIC to galley, from radar bay to comms station, no one said a word about the woman who'd arrived with nothing but a canvas bag and a tattoo that glowed. Because some stories don't get told. They're carried. Merrick stood at the forward observation post hours later, hands behind his back. No reports had been filed. None would be, just encrypted code that would vanish by midnight. He closed his eyes briefly. Not for sleep, but for memory. Far below, the ocean stretched, empty and clean, and somewhere beyond it, unseen and unknowable, something watched back, not with threat, but recognition, a resonance shared, a line drawn and respected. And Arden Thorne, whoever she was, had made it possible. Then the ship moved on, quiet, steady, and whole again.